Today, we're going to tackle an epic story, a 3,000-year journey to understand one of the world's most complex and enduring civilizations, Iran. So, that's the big question, right? To really get what's happening in Iran today, you can't just look at the last few decades of headlines. No way. The real story, the one that truly matters, is written across a millennia of incredible empires, world-changing conquests, and a cultural will to survive that is just mind-blowing.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with Iran's time as a true global superpower. Then we'll watch its dramatic conquest and amazing rebirth. We'll see how a unique Shia identity was forged, and finally we'll look at the modern pressures that created the nation we know today. Let's dive in.
First up, the land of ancient empires. And listen, we're not just talking about some other regional power here. We are talking about the birthplace of the world's very first global superpower, the real deal. So way back, long before most nations you and I know even existed, a series of mighty empires rose up from the Iranian plateau. It started with the Medes, but it was the Achaemenids, led by the legendary Cyrus the Great, who built the planet's first true superpower. They were followed by the tough-as-nails Parthians and the glorious Sasanians, and each of them left their own huge mark on history. So what's this number all about? Get this. At its absolute peak, the Achaemenid Empire was home to an incredible 40% of the entire world's population. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. No empire in history had ever come close to that kind of global reach. It was a concentration of power the world had never seen. And that legacy, that idea of being a center of the world, well, it's a deep source of pride even today. And that brings us to the Sasanians, the last great Persian empire before the arrival of Islam. For 400 years, they were a global heavyweight, locked in this monumental, centuries-long struggle with Rome and later Byzantium, a rivalry that literally defined the ancient world. But, you know, every great empire eventually faces its greatest test. And that brings us to our next chapter, Conquest and Renaissance. This is a story of a profound crisis, where a new faith arrives, but an ancient, powerful culture just refuses to die. So in the 7th century, armies swept out of Arabia, and in just a couple of decades, the mighty Sasanian Empire fell. This was a cataclysmic shift. It wasn't just a new religion, it was an entirely new political and social order for the whole land, a total game changer. But then something absolutely fascinating happened. Instead of being erased, Persian culture started this process we call Persianization. In a lot of ways, the conquerors actually became culturally conquered. You see, Persian language, their systems of administration, their art, it was all so sophisticated that it was adopted and woven into the very fabric of the new Islamic world. And this led to an unbelievable cultural explosion. Persian poets like Ferdowsi wrote the Shahnameh, an epic poem that basically preserved the soul of ancient Iran. Thinkers like Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, became giants of philosophy and medicine. His work influenced Europe for centuries. Persian art and architecture, it became the gold standard of the Islamic Golden Age. So this wasn't an end, it was a full-blown renaissance. Okay, this brings us to our third major turning point, the forging of a new, distinct Shia identity. This is the moment where Iran begins to set itself on a religious path that's really unique in the Muslim world. But first, another catastrophe. In the 13th century, the Mongol hordes under Genghis Khan and his successors came crashing down on Iran. And the destruction, it was on a scale that's hard to even imagine. Cities were leveled, libraries were burned to the ground, the ancient irrigation systems that had sustained life for centuries were just annihilated. It was a truly dark time. For centuries after that, Iran was ruled by foreign Mongol and Turco-Mongol dynasties. The land was fragmented. But out of all this chaos, a new native Persian power was finally rising from the ashes, the Safavids. And right here, this is a moment that changes everything. In 1501, the Safavid ruler, Shah Ismail, makes a monumental decision. He declares 12 Shia Islam the official state religion. Now, at the time, most Iranians were actually Sunni, so this act was a political and religious earthquake. It carved out a unique identity for Iran, setting it apart from its powerful Sunni neighbors like the Ottoman Empire. And that legacy, it defines the region to this very day. All right, let's fast forward a bit. We're now entering the modern era, a time when Iran found itself caught between powerful, expanding European empires and facing immense pressure from the outside world.
By the 19th century, Iran was a key player in what historians call the Great Game. You can think of it as a Cold War of its time. It was this intense strategic rivalry between the Russian Empire, pushing down from the north, and the British Empire, which was paranoid about protecting its prized jewel, India, over to the east. And Iran, it was squeezed right in the middle of it all.
And this pressure wasn't just diplomatic, it was military. A series of devastating wars with Russia ended with Iran being forced to give up huge territories in the Caucasus, lands that are now Georgia, Armenia, and the Republic of Azerbaijan. For Iran, this was a profound national trauma. It was a loss of lands that had been part of its world for centuries.
So in 1925, a new dynasty, the Pahlavis, comes to power, and they launched this massive campaign of rapid, top-down modernization. They wanted to make Iran secular and strong. Oil money was pouring in, funding huge projects. They introduced social reforms like the White Revolution. But all this rapid change, combined with an autocratic government and really close ties to the West, created these deep social and religious tensions, just bubbling right under the surface.
And all those tensions we just talked about, well, they're about to explode. This brings us to the final, dramatic culmination of all these historical forces, the 1979 revolution, a moment that would, once again, completely reshape Iran and its relationship with the entire world. You see, the revolution didn't just come out of nowhere. It was the product of everything we've been talking about. It was fueled by that deep-seated resistance to foreign interference that goes all the way back to the Great Game. It was powered by that unique Shia identity forged by the Safavids, and it was driven by a widespread demand for a political system that was authentically Iranian. So, after a vote, the 2,500-year-old monarchy was gone. On April 1st, 1979, Iran officially became an Islamic republic, and it was built on this unique political theory from Ayatollah Khomeini called Vilayat-e-Faqih, which translates to guardianship of the jurist. This principle puts ultimate authority in the hands of a supreme religious leader, not an elected one. It was a radical departure, and it kicked off a brand new chapter in Iran's long, long story. So, from the very first global empire all the way to the Islamic Republic, Iran's story is just one of incredible continuity and stunning transformation. It's a civilization that's been conquered time and again, but never culturally erased. One that constantly adapts, reinvents, and redefines itself. Which, of course, leaves us with the ultimate question. What do you think its next chapter will look like? If you enjoyed that deep dive and want to explore more stories of the people and powers that shaped our world, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Time of Titans. Thanks so much for joining us.